if you have rel. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Big City B. I'm B for those of you who are just joining me for the first time. If you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so you know when my next videos are coming out. Alrighty, let's get started. Today's book review is going to be Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. For this book, this is a contemporary fiction and there are some trigger warnings, so make sure you check out the description down below. Here's your summary. Gifty is a fifth-year candidate in neuroscience at Stanford studying reward-seeking behavior in mice and the neural circuits of depression and addiction. Her mother is living in her bed. Gifty is determined to discover the scientific basis for the suffering she sees all around her. Alrighty, your characters for this book. For track 1, we have Gifty and her mother, who she calls the Black Mamba. For track 2, we have Nana, or Buzz, her brother, and Pastor John. For track 3, we have the Chin Chin Man, who is Gifty's father, Han, who is another science candidate at Stanford, and Catherine, who is another candidate at Stanford. Jumping into what I liked about this book, the first thing that I liked was the exploration in the differences between religion and science. Gifty grows up in a really religious, dense household, but growing up she begins to question the religion and starts to become involved in science, and how those things often come into conflict with each other is a main journey for her as she weaves through which bits and pieces of each she takes along with her. For the second thing that I liked, it's a continuation of the first, and that's Gifty's self-exploration or self-growth journey that she goes on. We see Gifty at various ages in her life through flashback and journal entries, and seeing her kind of pick where she goes in life and what drives her choices in life. It was very interesting. The third thing that I liked about this book was that even though it did have religious aspects, it wasn't blind faith religion, and I didn't feel like the religious aspect was being thrown in my face and forced down my throat. I think part of this is because Gifty is questioning a lot of her religion and the religious teachings that she's been taught, and I can relate to that because I would often be the kid in religious school who would question what the rabbi was teaching us, and he later had to pull me aside and be like, okay, yeah, not everything that happened in the Torah was true, but it's the general lessons you're supposed to learn. So I understand Gifty's questioning of the things that she was taught. The fourth thing that I liked about this book is Yaa's writing. I think that she does a really great job of weaving stories together and putting a lot of information within the confines of her book and exploring different topics. The first book that I read from her was Homegoing, and I really loved that book. And even though this book is different than Homegoing, I could see a lot of the same writing tendencies that was very smooth and flowing and continuous. On to things that I did not like about this book. The first thing that I didn't like about this book is that at times it was a little too introspective. Sometimes Gifty would go on these kind of rambling thought trails and questionings, which I understand relates back to the scientific method where you form a hypothesis, you test it, and then you question again until you get an answer. But in a book, it just seemed to drag a little bit in those sections. The second thing that I wasn't particularly fond of is because this book is more of a self-discovery journey, growth, there isn't a real conflict that drives the book. Yes, we have Gifty's mother who is staying with Gifty at this point in the book, but even that doesn't seem to be a huge conflict in Gifty's life, and it's more of just following Gifty on this growing up journey. And because of that, there's no real resolution at the end of the book at all. The third and final thing that I didn't particularly like about this book is that at the end, I still felt like there was something missing. And maybe it's because this book doesn't have a strong conflict or resolution to it, but I just felt incomplete. Alrighty, let's move on over to Goodreads takes. Goodreads ended up giving this book a 4.19. Goodreads liked that they could empathize with the struggle to differentiate between what you're taught versus what you discover as you grow older. They also liked the many topics that were touched on in this book, whether that be mental health or addiction, love, loss, racism, family matters. This book had a lot of different topics, including religion and science being, I would say, the main two, in addition to mental illness and addiction. Lastly, they really enjoyed that the writing felt authentic and honest, and they felt like they really knew the main character. On the flip side, the things that Goodreads didn't like, firstly, was the time jumps. They felt it was too difficult to keep track of and was drawn out, even though the real story only spans over a week. They also didn't like that the story felt like it was too removed or too emotionally void from the main character's perspective. And I understand where this criticism would be coming from. But you can also say that this is a defense mechanism from the trauma in her childhood and having to deal with her brother, her father, and her mother. Lastly, Goodreads didn't like that this story felt meandering. And I kind of agree. It goes in with the whole story being set up as a self-exploration, growth, trope, quest, journey, because it doesn't have that specific conflict where we know exactly where that's hitting and where it's gonna go and we're heading towards a resolution. This one does meander throughout Gifty's issues and problems and life. I can't say that I'm all that mad about Goodreads takes today because I understand where they're all coming from for the ones who didn't like it. Sorry if you were looking for that shade, it's not here in this review. Quote number 1. There will come a time when you need someone to wipe your ass for you. This is important because I think a lot of people think that they're infallible and that they're just never gonna get old and never gonna need anyone's help. And I think in many ways that stops someone from helping others, but you're gonna get there. Eventually, you're gonna need help wiping your butt. It should humble you a little bit and make you more willing to care for others. Quote number 2. That's science, but it's also everything, isn't it? Try, experiment, ask a ton of questions. That is indicative of both science and life. In life, we're constantly questioning things. We still are experimenting with relationships and hobbies and trying new foods or trying to stay organized or trying to work out. It's a constant try, experiment, ask a ton of questions. Lastly, would I recommend this book? Yes, but if you have read Homegoing, then I would caution you because this book is not like Homegoing. Homegoing was very much character, story, person to person, family, heritage driven. You could see the many stories, you understood where it was going, there was an interconnected thread. This book is more of a exploration between religion and science and discovering where your belief system comes from and also dealing with the hardships of addiction and mental illness. And it's not written in the same story-driven way as Homegoing was. And I think there was a lot of criticism for that on Goodreads as well, of people who had read Homegoing, expected Transcendent Kingdom to also be like Homegoing, and then were disappointed because they weren't that into hearing about the very scientific terms of neuroscience and experiments done on mice. So if you're thinking that you want to read this book because you liked Homegoing and you want another book like Homegoing, I would say this is not the book for you. If you really enjoy an exploration journey and questioning of religion and science, and you are open to hearing about very scientific terms for neuroscience and addiction and reward-seeking behavior, then this would be a good book for you. If you've read anything by Yaa Gyasi, please let me know down in the comments what you read and what you thought of it. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and make sure you're subscribed and hit that bell notification so you know when my next videos are coming out. Alrighty everyone, all the best always. Bye!